So as you can see, this paint is in really bad shape. It's seen better days. The sun has destroyed it, and they've let it go and let it go and let it go, and finally decided to get this painted. So the first thing we need to do is to mask off all these edges real well so we don't damage any of the trim or the glass. And we need to sand this smoothly, because we need to sand all this old paint off. Maybe not totally, but it needs to be smooth so we can apply some primer to it. So how we're gonna achieve that is we're gonna take our orbital sander and we're gonna use an 80 grit to knock down all this rough area. Okay, so now I'm gonna tape off the windows and all the trim, and then we're gonna get to sanding this and stripping this down to bare metal. Because of the rust issue, we're going to take it down to bare metal. Now your panel, it may be cracked and you may have to strip it down to bare metal as well, but if it's just delaminated from the sun, which is faded or something of that nature, then you probably don't have to take it all the way down to bare metal, and you could go over it with some 180 and then some 320 and then prime it and get a good coat of primer on it and then sand that. But if it's cracked, you need to strip it off and remove all that old paint. So I'm holding the DA flat and I'm just going over this entire panel, and as you can see, I'm going to give you a closer look here. You can see all those cracks in the paint, and you can actually see the rust as well. But what you want to do is hold that DA flat, sand it all off. I wouldn't use a grinder on this. You're going to grind into the metal. You want to use sandpaper. So you could use a chemical stripper, paint stripper, to remove this paint, but I just find that it creates a mess. And if it was a hood and I had it off the vehicle, then I could do that and it may be worth it. But with this new dustless system I have, it's just so easy to sand this off with the 80 grit. It takes a little bit of time, but it doesn't create a mess, and I think it's just the best way to do it. So now I've mixed up some 2K primer. This is the primer I'm using. It's a Master Pro 2K primer, 4 parts primer, and then you put in 1 part activator. Here's the part number. It's a good primer. It's not a super high build primer, so you're not going to fill a lot of scratches and stuff with it, but it goes on smooth, easy sands. So this is the primer I'm using. We mix some up in our gun and we're going to spray it right now. Okay, so we got everything masked off so we don't get any overspray. And I've already put 1 coat on. We're going to put our 2nd coat on right now. Nice even passes, 50% overlap. As you can see, I don't have a lot of pressure going on here. Not necessary. I just want to get good coverage. Just a side note here, I want to give you some information about primer, and when you primer over bare metal, your best bet and what I would recommend is to use a self-etching primer over bare metal. That's really what it calls for, and that's really what you should be using. I did not use that here, but I just wanted to let you know, use a self-etching primer over any bare metal. Okay, so now I'm going to put some automotive guide coat over this, and I just want to let you know all the links to the products I use are going to be in the description below, so if you're interested in any of that. I am putting a guide coat on this, and the reason I'm going to do that is when I take my 320 grit sandpaper and I sand over it, it's going to show if there's any low areas, if there's any dents that need to be removed, or if it's just going to help me sand it smoothly. So when that guide coat is gone, then I know that panel is smooth. Now I'm going to go over the whole thing with 320, but then I'm going to go back over it with a 600 grit sandpaper before I paint. Okay, so here's a good example of what the guide coat will do. If you look in the center of the screen, that little black dot, that is a dent that the guide coat still remains in that dent. So when I sand over it and you hold your DA flat when you're sanding, that's going to show those low spots, and it's going to show any dents or dings.
I'm not straightening any dents on this roof, but if you have dents in your vehicle and you need to learn how to repair those, check out the video at the end and I'll show you exactly how to do that. Okay, so now it's all sanded. I went over it with 600 to smooth it out thoroughly for the new paint. We're going to remove all the paper and all the trim there, and we're going to re-tape it up before we spray. I'm painting some other things on this vehicle, but I'm really just focused on the roof in this video to give you an idea of how to repair cracked paint. Okay, this is the footage of me applying the second coat of paint, but on the first coat of paint, the first thing you want to do before you apply paint is you want to use a prep solvent, a wax and grease remover, and wipe the entire panel down to remove any contaminants or anything, dust that has landed on this panel. Then you want to put a medium coat on for your first coat. You don't want to put it on too wet, because if you put it on wet, you could have a reaction. So put it on medium and then apply 2 to 3 coats to get good coverage. Okay, so now I'm starting to apply the clear, and one thing that's important is when you start applying the clear, you want to start on the closest edge to you, work your way to the center, and then flip around and go from the center out. That's going to give you a wet edge of clear the entire time, and that's very important for a good finish, a good gloss, and for it to be uniform, okay? You also want to start spraying off the panel. You don't want to pull the trigger on the panel. You could run it, you could build up clear in that spot, and then do a nice even stroke. You also want to overlap 50 to 60% of your passes. Now I'm working my way from the center out, and I'm doing it in kind of sections since I'm on a roof and it's a little difficult to have to move my step ladder there a little bit. So some quick tips on the gun setup, what I like to use. I like to open my fan pattern wide open. That's that knob right there. Turn it all the way open for clear, and that'll give you the widest pattern you can have. And then the volume right there, you want to turn it all the way in, and then 3 turns out is what I start with, and then you can adjust from there. And then as far as on your air pressure, the regulator, you want to be around 25 psi. You can adjust that to how you feel comfortable, but that's basically what you want to start off with. So with those gun settings and just some standard techniques that I've given you here, you should get a really nice finish. I think you'll be surprised. But listen, if you don't get a nice finish and you have some dust or dirt or something that needs to be taken care of, check out this video right here and I'll show exactly how to sand it out and take care of it. If you want to build your skill and increase your knowledge, start now by subscribing and clicking that bell. I appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time.